The winter of 1944 pressed down upon the Ardennes like a clenched fist. Snow was falling in slow, deliberate sheets, settling over the forest with the same quiet menace that had haunted the region for months. To most American soldiers stationed along the thin defensive lines, the forest had begun to feel alive, an ancient creature watching from behind the mist. But for Private Samuel Harker, it was the only home he had known for weeks. Harker was not a soldier who drew attention. He was thinner than most, kept mostly to himself, and had a reputation for tinkering with equipment long after lights out. But underneath that quiet exterior lived a mind as sharp as a blade and a heart shaped by years of loss, hard work, and an obsession with mechanical precision. He came from a rural patch of Tennessee, Redwater Hollow, where moonshine stills and rust-eaten farm tools were as common as morning frost. His father had been a gunsmith, though the term was generous. He repaired hunting rifles for neighbors, fixed old shotguns, and nursed rusted metal back to working order. Samuel grew up inhaling the smell of gun oil and cold steel, and learned early that broken never meant useless. It was that philosophy that would lead him onto a collision course with military bureaucracy, a battle he never expected to fight, one that would define him long before the Germans ever had the chance. Samuel Harker arrived in Europe carrying an M1 Garand like everyone else in his unit. But during the early weeks of the campaign, a supply truck carrying spare parts and weapons suffered a mechanical breakdown. While waiting for the unit to move out, Harker found himself rummaging through the crates stacked behind the immobilized vehicle. There he discovered a rifle unlike anything he had seen. It was old, older than regulation allowed, its receiver patched with mismatched metal plates, its barrel worn smooth, and its lock mechanism covered in an orange bloom of corrosion. Someone, sometime, had painted the words, "Rust Lock," crudely under the handguard, probably as a joke. Harker held it like an artifact. Something about it called to him. Where others saw decay, he saw history. He saw potential. "What in God's name are you doing with that scrap?" Sergeant Mullins barked when he saw Harker cleaning it by the campfire that night. "Just restoring it, Sarge," Harker replied quietly. "It's banned. Non-standard issue. You get caught with it, and you'll lose your hide." But Harker didn't care. Over the next 2 weeks he worked on the rifle in secret. He rebuilt the trigger housing from spare springs he scavenged. He refiled the chamber. He polished the inside of the action until the rust was a memory. And though he left the odd patches and mismatched plates alone, they felt like part of the rifle's soul. He shaped the weapon into something reliable. Something deadly. And the rifle seemed to reward him for the effort. Its accuracy was uncanny. Its bolt cycled with a strange, smooth resistance, a rhythm he quickly learned by heart. The weapon felt alive. Still, military rules were rules. By November, word spread through the company that battalion inspectors were coming. Anything unregulated would be confiscated. When a young lieutenant caught sight of the odd weapon Harker had slung over his shoulder, everything changed. "What is that?" the lieutenant demanded. Harker explained the history of the rifle as best he could, what little he had gleaned from its design. The lieutenant didn't care. "This is unauthorized equipment. It's banned from use in the field. You will turn it in immediately." And so the rifle was taken, locked away in an ammunition crate, sealed under orders, and logged as non-compliant weaponry. Harker felt as though part of him had been confiscated alongside it. By mid-December, rumors spread of a German counteroffensive forming somewhere beyond the snowy horizon. Command dismissed most of it as unfounded intelligence, until it wasn't. The Battle of the Bulge erupted like a thunderclap. Harker and his unit were stationed near a remote Belgian hamlet, a cluster of stone buildings huddled along a frozen road. Their orders were simple: hold the line long enough for reinforcements to organize. On the morning the attack began, fog spread through the forest like spilled milk. Visibility dropped to 10 yards. Men spoke in whispers. Every crunch of snow sounded like footsteps. Every creak of a tree felt like a rifle bolt sliding into place. By midday, German patrols probed the perimeter. By nightfall they attacked. Harker and the others dug in behind a low ridge, their breath nearly invisible in the frigid air. The sound of German boots crunching snow echoed between the trees. Then came the bursts of automatic fire, short, disciplined patterns. "Snipers," Mullins whispered. "They're picking at us." It was true. German marksmen, hidden in the black labyrinth of the forest, were taking shots at anything that moved. Harker pressed himself deeper into the frost-covered soil. The Americans could barely return fire. Visibility was too poor. The forest was too thick. By dawn, 3 men were dead. Something had to change. That evening, after another failed attempt to track the German snipers, Mullins leaned close to Harker in the trench. "You said that rust bucket of yours was accurate, right?" Harker nodded slowly. "Think you can find it?" The ammunition shack where the confiscated rifle was stored sat 200 yards behind the defensive line. It was risky. But without a counter-sniper, they were sitting ducks. So Harker waited until nightfall and slipped from the trench, moving low through the snow, hugging the shadows of broken stone walls and burned-out vehicles. A shell crater had torn open part of the shack's wall earlier in the week. Harker squeezed through, pried open the crate, and pulled the rifle from its prison. It felt like greeting an old friend. He checked the chamber. "Clean. Oiled. Ready," he whispered. "Let's work." The next morning, German fire resumed as soon as the fog thinned. "Same tree line!" someone shouted. Harker crawled forward through the snow until he reached a small rise offering a narrow angle into the woods. His heartbeat slowed. His breath steadied. The world contracted to the cold metal pressed against his cheek. He scanned the tree line. At first, nothing. Then he saw it, a shift of shadow behind a broken birch trunk. A faint glimmer of glass. A sniper's scope. Harker exhaled. The rust lock cracked like a hammer falling on an anvil. The German sniper toppled sideways silently, disappearing into the underbrush. Mullins blinked at Harker. "One." But there were more. For the next 48 hours, the Germans launched coordinated probing attacks, small squads attempting to flank, test, and wear down the American line. Embedded among them were snipers, skilled and patient. But Harker was more patient. He moved like a ghost between positions, never staying in one place long enough to be triangulated. His rifle, once dismissed as scrap, became his compass, his voice, his warning bell. Every time he saw movement, a shifting helmet, a muzzle flash, a shadow stepping wrong, he squeezed the trigger. 2 more German sharpshooters fell before noon. By sunset he had tracked 2 others by following their firing patterns, anticipating their angles, and outmaneuvering them through sheer instinct. He was not killing for thrill or pride. He was killing to stop the slow bleeding of his unit. To protect the men who slept beside him in the trenches, and the wounded who groaned in the makeshift aid station behind the lines. Word spread through the company quickly. "Harker's got another one. That rusty rifle of his is magic. Someone get that boy a medal." But Harker ignored the talk. He only cleaned the rifle, rechecked every screw, whispered to it like an old friend. The forest grew colder. Snow thicker. Shadows deeper. And still he hunted. On the second night, the Germans launched their fiercest attempt yet to break the American line. Explosions lit the sky like angry stars. Machine gun bursts stitched glowing lines across the snow. In the chaos, a German squad managed to slip through one flank. They were heading straight toward the American aid station. Harker saw them first. He sprinted across the snow, slid behind a fallen tree, and braced the rust lock across the bark. 7 Germans advanced in a staggered formation, 2 snipers behind them providing overwatch. Harker fired once. One of the overwatch snipers fell. He shifted aim, fired again. The second sniper dropped. The German squad panicked, looking for the source of the deadly precision. Harker moved before they could locate him, rolling down the slope, repositioning behind a shattered farmhouse wall. 2 more shots. 2 more Germans collapsed. But one remained, the squad leader, a tall, broad man with a veteran's posture. He ducked behind a tree, fired bursts from his MP40, kicking up snow around Harker's boots. Harker waited. Listened. He knew rifles. He knew people. And he knew fear. The German soldier leaned out just half an inch too far. Harker's shot pierced the stillness. The soldier fell forward, motionless. 9 Germans in 48 hours. The line held. And the aid station, filled with wounded men who could not defend themselves, remained untouched. When reinforcements finally arrived and the German assault ebbed, the battalion commander called Harker into a makeshift headquarters inside a ruined barn. On the table in front of him lay the rust-lock rifle. The commander, Colonel Henley, tapped the weapon with a gloved finger. "This rifle was banned," he said. "Non-regulation. Non-standard. By all accounts, you should have been disciplined for using it." Harker remained silent. Henley leaned forward. "But my men tell me you saved 27 lives, maybe more. They tell me you single-handedly silenced multiple sniper nests. And that without your actions, this position would have collapsed." He paused. "I don't care if this rifle was forged in a barnyard by a blacksmith with a blindfold on. It stays with you." Harker felt something tighten in his chest, a mixture of pride, relief, and something deeper, something like gratitude. As he turned to leave, Henley added, "Private, whatever you did out there, teach it to others." In the weeks that followed, Harker was assigned a small group of riflemen whom he trained in field craft, stealth, and marksmanship. He taught them not just to shoot, but to observe, to listen, to understand a battlefield's rhythm the way a farmer understands the weather. He never boasted of the 9 Germans. He never claimed glory. But word of his actions spread far beyond the Ardennes. By the time the war ended, the rust-lock rifle had become a kind of legend, an impossible weapon that should never have worked, wielded by a soldier who should never have been noticed, in a battle that should never have been survived. When Harker returned home to Tennessee, he brought the rifle with him. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Of the forest. Of the men he saved. Of the 9 adversaries whose lives he ended not out of hatred, but out of duty. Of the belief that broken things, whether tools or people, still had value. Still had purpose. Still had a place in the world. And for the rest of his life, whenever someone asked him how a soldier with a rusted rifle changed the course of a battle, he would smile softly and say, "It wasn't the rifle. It was knowing how to listen to it."